Hello and welcome to Talking Europe. My guest today is a leading voice on the democratisation of the European Union. Alberto Alemanno is Jean Monnet Professor of EU Law at the elite HEC Business School in Paris. But he's not just an academic. With his startup, The Good Lobby, he aims to boost civil society's ability to carry out advocacy and also to make corporate political influence more accountable. So it's fitting that we should be talking to him about the Qatargate scandal that has rocked the European Parliament for the last few weeks. Alberto Alemanno joins me from Bilbao in the Basque Country in Spain. Professor Alemanno, thank you so much for being my guest. Broadly speaking, what impact do you think this Qatargate scandal has had on the European Union so far?
Well, the Qatargate is certainly the worst possible scandal affecting the European Union since its origin back in the 50s. And as the Qatargate is unfolding, the impact is already producing is definitely multiple. It's very difficult to imagine how far this scandal would be, but we can certainly already see that today is somehow pushing the European Union and the European political class to a major reckoning. Also in the European Union, money by influence. And this is something that very few people, very few political leaders would have acknowledged only a few weeks ago. But now it's part of of public opinion, it's part of common knowledge, and this hopefully will create enough momentum for creating major political reforms. At the same time, we see major instrumentalization already happening. We see some political parties using this scandal in order to score political points and trying to politicize the entire scandal instead of tackling this as a bipartisan issue that deserves further reflection and a political class coming together and saying, let's use this opportunity to rethink which are the rules of the game.
You've argued that enforcement has to move from a political responsibility to a legal liability, but also that you don't see a lot of political will for that to happen at the moment. Just explain a bit more what you mean by those two things.
Well, the European Union on paper has one of the best possible systems for integrity and ethical behavior of its own elected and non-elected officials. However, we have seen over the last few years, this is not the only scandal that occurred, but it's certainly the one that captured our imagination also because the modes that were employed, we could see clearly that the enforcement of those rules is clearly not able to guarantee or to avoid possible misbehavior by political leaders. And the reason for that is that the only possible way to apply those rules, preventing conflict of interest, is basically in the hands of the political responsibility of the President of the European Parliament and or the European Commission. That basically means that unless we make the system no longer self-policing itself, having colleagues judging one another, we're not going to be able to make those rules gain some teeth and therefore introducing some incentives for people to change behavior and creating some forms of accountability by enabling the media, enabling civil society also to check political behavior. At the moment, it remains pretty much a black box, the way in which the European Parliament is working vis-à-vis third parties.
Yeah. On the broader question of money allegedly buying influence, I mean, you started this organization that I mentioned in the introduction, The Good Lobby, in order to empower civil society. I'm just wondering if you find that perhaps a major barrier for more people to get involved in advocacy to the European Parliament, for example, is that they simply don't feel that they have the sort of influence that special interests and industry lobbyists have. And so what's the point of even getting involved in the first place? Is that a problem that you've come up against a lot?
Well, the European Union is, again, on paper, very much accessible to interest coming from all around Europe and also outside of Europe. And this is a good thing. You know, European institutions, as any other political organization, should be accessible. However, when you look at the reality of who is actually knocking the door and getting the attention of political leaders, you will see that approximately 75% of meetings taking place in Brussels, they do take place with the usual suspects. It basically means corporations, organizations that have a lot of political power, political clout, who manage to get access. The other remaining 25% of the meetings take place with trade unions. They take place with a few NGO, a few organizations. So there's a David and Goliath scenario that my organization, among others, try to tackle by saying time has come to equalize access to power, because the more interests are represented in the system, the better the outcome of the policy process will be.
But that David and Goliath equation only changes if more people feel that they actually have the power to change something, an ordinary citizen. That's really the missing starting point, isn't it, at the moment?
Well, it is. However, the reality is mixed. We see some NGOs who have been extremely successful in setting the agenda, in mobilizing civil society, and managing to capture the imagination and the political attention of the European institutions. It happened with the trade agreement, the TTIP. It happens periodically on certain specific chemical substances and pesticides. So it's not impossible. Individuals are not powerless, but certainly episodes like the Qatargate, they are certainly chilling their attempt at getting better at knocking the door to their political representatives.
Alberto Alemanno, as you are a commentator on European affairs in a broader sense, I want to ask you what your expectations are of the Swedish presidency of the EU, which has just begun.
Well, the Swedish presidency will be defining the agenda for the next 6 months. So the presidency of the Council is no longer as important as it used to be. Now we have a president of the Council who is permanent, who is actually running the show in Brussels on a permanent basis. However, the Swedish government will certainly define its own priorities. And what we have here over the last few days, speculation is mounting that possibly due to the support that the Swedish Democrats are giving to the current government, there won't be much more political appetite to tackle issues like migration policy and their overall stance on issues like the Ukraine war or the economic perspectives. The overall take by Sweden will be quite moderate, possibly conservative, and this will not necessarily be the best possible approach given the major challenges the European Union is facing today. We also see the preparation of the next European elections happening. This will be a transition year. We are closing the policy cycle, and we are actually witnessing a major rapprochement between the European Popular Party, the largest party in Europe, with the European conservative family, the ECR, led by Ms. Meloni, the Prime Minister of Italy, to which European political party also the Swedish Democrats belong to. So this will be a very important lens to be used in order to understand what to expect from this Swedish presidency.
So in the light of those trends, are you expecting a stronger conservative front in these European elections?
No doubt. All the elements are there, suggesting that in this historical moment, the European Popular Party wants to seize the Qatargate backlash that we have to remember has been mainly affecting the socialists and Democrats and not necessarily the EPP or the right, in order to score political points and move to the right where basically the center of gravity of political opinion is today in Europe, in order to prepare and potentially win the next European elections and therefore define the political color of the next European Commission in 2024.
And that right-wing focus has expressed itself in these battles between Poland and Hungary and the EU on the rule of law issues. Do you think that in the next few months, would you expect to see more compromises by the EU on these rule of law issues in the interests of getting Polish and Hungarian support for the joint positions on Ukraine, for example?
Well, the rule of law situation will certainly prove as a major test for the next presidency of the Council and the entire policy cycle as it comes to an end. At the current point, we see all of a sudden the Commission becoming a bit bolder under the pressure of the European Parliament and basically making conditional the disbursements of funds to Hungary and potentially Poland upon compliance with a set of milestones, reforms which are long overdue in those countries. However, we also see that not the entire European Council, meaning not the all European leaders, seem favorable to this situation, and this conditionality might only be an excuse to gain some time to somehow keep everybody happy without necessarily creating enemies within the Council. So the rule of law will probably be one of the key elements that will allow us to understand how serious the European Union is in upholding its own values and to potentially set some red lines to countries like Poland and Hungary who have been systematically defying the rule of law by weakening judicial independence and media freedom in their own country.
Just very briefly, Alberto Alemanno, do you see any area of European policy that could be given a push in 2023, as of course we're still at the start of this new year?
Quite frankly, 2023 looks like a major year for the European Union in which probably new bold ideas won't find much of support. But the Green New Deal as a package, meaning the major ecological transition, is work in progress. It has been affected by COVID. It has been affected and continues to be modified every single day because of the Ukraine situation, the energy crisis, and the economic perspectives. But this is basically the von der Leyen legacy. That's what this Commission is supposed to deliver. And hopefully, the current political climate will allow the Green New Deal to develop and to become law by 2024. Because without this, we're not going to be able to enter into a new policy cycle and to basically have the European Union ready to face both internal and external challenges and to remain a leader in this particular historical moment of geopolitical transformations.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you so much for your insights, Professor Alberto Alemanno. And that's all for part one of Talking Europe. I'll be back in a few minutes with a panel of MEPs for a debate from the European Parliament. Hope you can join me then.